but now that I am, I'm kind of talking about something sort of serious. Well, as serious as a Snow White adaptation discussion can get. There are two battling Snow White movies coming out next year. We've got Mirror Mirror starring Lily Collins and Julia Roberts, and Snow White and the Huntsman starring Charlize Theron and Kristen Stewart. And there's an article published on Jezebel, and I know some of you guys have issues with Jezebel, but that's not really the point. It's more of what they're trying to say. That in both of these adaptations, they're very whitewashed. And I wanted to discuss kind of my opinion on that kind of idea of both of these films having very much white cast. And I know I've heard a lot of arguments going against Jezebel saying, well, of course it is. It's called Snow White, blah, blah. But I just wanted to say, basically, what I think about the whole situation. It's reaffirming not a white standard of beauty, but like a Caucasian standard of beauty. Because if you look at the characteristics of Snow White, she could easily be Asian. I mean, she's supposed to have pale skin and dark ebony hair. I mean, why not? I mean, the girl who played Lana Lane from Smallville played Snow White adaptation years ago. Why not have another Asian Snow White? I mean, Zhang Ji, I know she's older, but she looks young enough to play a teenage Snow White as the other two do, and she's got all the proper features to do so. Or you could even get a Latina Snow White who also is pale and has dark hair. I mean, if the qualities we're looking for are beauty, fair skin, and dark hair, that doesn't mean that Snow White has to be Caucasian. She just has to have white skin. And that is not a Caucasian attribute. It's not only Caucasians who can have white skin. You can be black and be of mixed descent and also have white skin. And them casting both Snow Whites in that sense, I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that or going back to those basics, but it doesn't do anything unique with the characters. I mean, this is a modern retelling of a story. It doesn't have to be exactly the way it is, and it already isn't. I mean, if you compare the original Grimm's fairy tale to Snow White, I mean, Snow White's supposed to be 8 years old. She's supposed to be 8 years old. The queen is supposed to try and kill her 3 times, and she's not awakened with a kiss. It's a totally different story in the sense of like all the famous actors, like this, even the Disney version of Snow White isn't a lot like the actual story. Not to mention people arguing about, well, historically, because it's German, there wouldn't be any blacks or Asians in there, which is totally inaccurate, because if you look at history, they have already established that there have been blacks in Europe for centuries before slavery, as well as Asians, because if you look at the history of the world, Asia was far beyond the West for centuries, so of course they probably traveled around. I mean, even if you look at the Roman Empire, they conquered parts of Upper Africa, and that there was trade and traveling going around, so it's almost inconceivable to assume that there were no blacks in Europe at this time. It may not have been the norm, but they existed, and people as well known as the Grimm brothers would have known that. And even so, with most fairy tales, they're based on oral traditions that exist much, much older than just the Western ones that we know that were collected by Perrault or the Grimm's brothers. I mean, I'm taking a class in children's literature now, and I just recently read Angela Carter's Book of Fairy Tales, and there are Cinderella stories from Chinese ancestry, from Arabic, all over the world. So to say that you can't have these adaptations have a more colored cast is just inaccurate, both historically and looking at the actual text themselves. Even if you want to take the fact that, if people want to argue about historical accuracy and, Snow White, do mirrors talk to you? Did magic mirrors exist in whatever time period you want to say this is taking place in? Absolutely not. So, you're dealing with fairy tales and magic on top of all of these other issues, but your main concern is saying, no, it has to be this way because that's a historical way, even though there's probably nothing of any historical basis except maybe social expectations about these texts. And that's the biggest problem with the people who find some serious argument about it. We're not trying to say like you have to have a black Snow White, even though there'd probably be no issue about having a black Snow White, because what the mother asks for when she pricks her finger is that she wants a child white as snow with she wants a child that is white as snow, red as blood, and black as ebony. And it's only when the child is born that she found out that she had skin as white as snow, hair as black as ebony, and red blah blah blah. If you just took the first part of what she asked for, you could rearrange it and the woman could end up looking like Storm, for all you know. But that's not even the main problem. These are not traditional or historical text, in a sense that what they're talking about needs to be properly channeled. You can make a modern adaptation of these fairy tales with a multicultural cast without any problem, because they're fairy tales. Look at Brandy's Cinderella, which is probably one of the best colorblind casting things you will ever see, and it's a beautiful story. It stays loyal pretty much to the original text, and it has a multicultural cast, and it's not treated as an issue, and Brandy is beautiful, so there's no problem believing that she would attract a prince. So why do we have to conform to all these social norms and beauty standards that make no sense? Personally, I could really not care, because I don't want to see either of these movies, partly because, you've got one hand where they want to have the Huntsman movie with, Snow White being a faux feminist, most likely. I mean, I hate the whole idea of when you give a woman a sword, all of a sudden it makes her a feminist. That's not even the case. And you've got Mirror Mirror, which has Julia Roberts in it, and that already deters me from seeing that movie. But, it's just sad that so many people are so stuck in these Western ideas that they don't understand why multicultural texts can exist. I mean, if you look at the history of fairy tales, it's not that simple. I mean, even if you look at the tale of Beauty and the Beast, it's if you look at the origin of that, Psyche and Eros, that's their story. There are so many other tales that have to do with the same issues. I mean, in this book they have a Beauty and the Beast tale, all kinds of different stories. I mean, with a modern interpretation and modern adaptation, people should have the bravery and the creativity to think outside of the box when developing these stories. I mean, we know the story of Snow White. Make it interesting, and make it with an interesting group of characters instead of just conforming to what one side of beauty means. It's sad when you look at the 90s and think, oh, look at all the stuff that happened that was progressive then, and then you look at it now, it's just like, well, blah. I mean, if you count the number of people of color led television shows from 90s and early 2000 shows to now, there's a big disparity. And it's sad, and this is just another proof of that. I mean, while I could care less about Snow White, it still carries a certain meaning. It's still an important tale in the sense of how it talks about beauty and the role of women in stories and the whole, gender roles and whatever. But even in just a pure entertainment value, there is nothing important about Snow White actually being Caucasian, as long as she is pale, ebony-haired, and pretty.
And she fell in love.
Was it hard to do?